Bienvenidos, Ushamdi, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the Spring 2023 semester taking the CTS-233 Section 400 Network Programmability course. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's DEVASC 200-901 Certification Exam Preparation course, and in this video tutorial, here is what you're going to learn about Lab 747. Not only are we going to use Ansible to back up and configure a Cisco CSR1kv, we're also going to show you a Python script that would do the exact same thing as the backup component. So you're going to have, and this is what I love about this lab, you're going to walk away with a Python script to do a backup of a Cisco device. You're going to walk away with an Ansible playbook to back up a Cisco device. And you're going to walk away with the Ansible playbook to configure a Cisco device. And again, in our case here, we're going to use a CSR1kv for the Ansible piece. For the Python piece, I'm actually going to show you that I can back up the configuration using a Cisco switch that I have sitting here at my house on my network. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive in. And before we type anything up, a couple of quick notes here. So as the lab kicks off, it talks about this etc Ansible directory. So if I was to list out etc Ansible, what are we going to see there? Well, we see the Ansible config, or the ansible.config, and we see the hosts file. But here's what's happening. When you run Ansible, if you're doing it in a directory where there is no Ansible config file, and you don't have the Ansible hosts file, then what's going to happen is it's going to reference these two files right here. So when you're running it globally is how the lab describes it, and we don't have those files in a current working directory or in our home directory, or we don't have this thing called the ansible_config environment variable set, it's going to fall back and rely on those two files right there that are in etc Ansible. Now, that is not what we want. So we want to create these files in the directory that we're currently sitting in. So on the DevASC virtual machine, I'm in labs, devnet source, Ansible, Ansible CSR1000v, and it's very commonly abbreviated as CSR1kv, just like that. So you'll hear me say CSR1kv. All right, so we're in that directory, and the first thing it wants us to do is to create this hosts file. Now, they already give us the file, and at the top of the file, it just simply has a comment. So if we were to go into our Ansible host file, now this is sometimes called the inventory file as well. And that's a synonymous, if you say the Ansible host, Ansible inventory, you're talking about the same thing, right? It's just simply the file that contains a list of the hosts that we want to operate on here, that we want to manipulate using Ansible. Now, this is the line from the lab, and in most cases, when you're working with the lab and the CSR1kv image, that would probably be the IP. However, we are probably going to see a different IP value, and chances are it's going to be something off your local network if you've got it configured to be using your local network adapter. And so you can see here for me, the IP address of my CSR1kv, which is just a VM that I have running, it's actually running on this iMac. That is the IP address. In fact, if I was to go ahead and pop over one screen here and hit enter a few times, here is that CSR1kv. And so if I go from user exec to privilege exec and I say show IP interface brief, right, for that old Cisco CLI command, it's going to show me my address. And so you can see if you're confused or not sure what your CSR1kv address is, this is the place to come take a look. All right, so we've got our address, we've got our address value in there. The hosts file has been created. Now, what was in that host file before we move on here? So let me cat out the host file here. So we have the CSR1kv, and think of that as an alias, right? That's all that is that's just an alias for the CSR1kv that we're running as a virtual machine. Then we've got some variables and values. Ansible user. So what's the username we're going to use to connect to that CSR1kv? Well, it's Cisco. What's the password that we're going to use to connect to that CSR1kv? Cisco123 exclamation mark. And then what is the Ansible host IP address, right? So what's the IP of the CSR1kv? And it's right there in Ansible, in your hosts file and in other files, as you saw, or as you will see when we look at the ansible.config. If you want to put comments in there, you can just use the pound sign just like we did with our Python scripts, right? So worked out fantastic. Now, we want to check and see what version of Python, what version of Ansible we're running. So if I say Ansible -- version, take a look at what we see here. So we can see we're running version 299. This is probably going to be different than your virtual machine simply because I've already done that sudo apt-get upgrade early on in one of the previous videos. And so I'm pretty sure that along with the Python version bumping from 3.8.2 to 3.8.10, the Ansible version probably got bumped up as well. Now, here's what's important. The config file. Remember, the lab was talking about this etc Ansible directory. And here, when you run the ansible-playbook command, here is how Ansible, and this is in the order that Ansible will look, right? So it's kind of an order of operations. When I go to run my Ansible-playbook, Ansible is going to look for my config file first for whatever I have the ansible_config, and if I was to say ansible_config, if I have that environment variable defined, that dictates where the Ansible playbook command will look for your ansible.cfg file. If you do not have that environment variable defined, and by default we don't have that here, if I was to say env and grep -i on ANSI, looking for Ansible, you can see that that's all we've got, right? We've got a PWD and an old PWD, and that is it, right? So if that environment variable is not defined, then Ansible says, okay, well, I'm going to look in the current working directory. And that is why we're creating both the hosts and the ansible.cfg file right here in the Ansible, excuse me, the ansible-CSR1kv directory. Now, if the environment variable is not defined and it's not in the current working directory, Ansible looks in your home directory for the ansible.cfg file. If it's not there, it does its last gasp, the fallback, and it's going to look in etc Ansible. And so that's why we're going to define that here in the current working directory so that it uses this ansible.cfg file right here in this directory, and it references the host file in this directory. And so you'll notice when I ran that ansible -- version command, where is it going to look for the config file? Well, again, it's right here in the current working directory, this ansible-CSR1000v. So what if I wasn't in that directory? What if I'm in the, what if I'm in the temp directory here and I say ansible -- version? Yeah, you can see it's going to look. It looks for that environment variable. It's not set. It looks here in the current working directory in /temp. It's not here. It looks in my home directory. It's not there. So what does it do? It falls back, and it's going to use the config file in etc Ansible. So again, just wanted you to understand that that is the order of operations or order of precedence that Ansible is going to take when it's trying to determine what Ansible config file it's going to use. All right, so let's clear our screen here. Let's get back into labs, DevNet, and Ansible, and then I think it's Ansible CSR1000v. And you can see I've got some other files in here that we're going to be taking a look at as well, just to give you some different examples, and that Python backup script is in here too. All right, so next on the Ansible front, right, we've got the hosts file sorted out. We know we're going to use username Cisco, password Cisco123, and we're going to go to our CSR1kv. So obviously next is we're going to take a look at that default ansible.cfg file. So I could say cat etc ansible and then ansible.cfg. We want to pipe it to more because, again, there is a ton of information in here. Now, where is it going to look for inventory, right? Where's the inventory or the hosts file? Well, you can see it's commented out there, but it would be looking, and we're looking at some basic values here, it would look in etc Ansible host, right? So that etc Ansible directory can be the fallback for a lot of things. What about host key checking, right? And that was the next value that they wanted us to take, excuse me, to take a look at. And I may have gone by it. If I didn't, I apologize. And let's see, host. And I don't see it. But again, there's a host key checking, and when that's set to false, if you uncomment that, it's going to disable SSH key host checking. And then there's a retry files. And so when a playbook fails, this little .retry file can be created that'll be placed in your home directory, and you can enable this feature by setting the retry files enabled to true. And so retry files, and where is that? Oh, well, here, let's go into, let's say sudo vi etc ansible / ansible.cfg. Let's get in here so we can take a look at it. So inventory is right there. If I was to look for host underscore key, there we go. Host underscore key checking, right? So uncomment that out if we wanted to not check for the key. And then we could do a, let's do a / retry, retry underscore files. And again, this is just kind of to give you an idea. And here's this retry files, right? And it goes into that ~/.ansible retry. So in your home directory, it's creating a hidden directory or hidden file in which it's going to keep that information. I almost said directory there, but it's in your home directory. It's going to create that hidden file, hidden because it begins with a dot. And so those are some of the things that you could do if you wanted to uncomment those values out. Now, notice in the Ansible config file that it's going to use etc ansible hosts. Again, I pointed that out, very important. And this is why we want to change the location of this file, and we want to put it into this directory right here, right? So if I do an ls, you can see I've got the ansible.cfg file. Let's vi ansible.cfg. Now, as you can see, they gave us a very, and I'll go ahead and drop this down here into file. They gave us a very trimmed down version of that ansible.cfg file. Again, this is intro, basic, getting you up and running, and then you could start to dig in and experiment with some of those other options that are available. So our inventory file, and this is important to point out, right? So in our Ansible config, this is just the defaults, meaning that this is what's going to run when we run this Ansible config file. So for the inventory or the host file, it's going to be /hosts. Now, important note right here. You'll notice they're putting comments at the end of these lines. And the reason that you can do that is because these are not file names here. False, false, false. If I was to put a comment after this /hosts, we'd have a problem. So Ansible doesn't let you do that on a line where what the comment follows is a file name. So remember that. Here, false, false, and false, those aren't file names, so I can put comments at the end. Host key checking. Don't worry about the RSA fingerprint, right? So we're going to set it to false. Retry files enabled, false. Deprecation warnings, false, right? So don't worry about the RSA fingerprints. Don't create the retry files, and don't show warnings. So basically, really all this is kind of doing is pointing us to our host file, right? And that's really the important thing, and that's what we want. Okay. Excuse me, kind of coughing there. All right, so what we're going to do next is we've got our Ansible config file all set up. Let's go ahead and let's save that file. Sorry about that. Let's clear the screen. And so something that's going to be really, really important, right? So we've got everything ready to go from the Ansible config perspective. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a playbook. Now I'm going to pull this up in VS Code because VS Code has you do something we haven't done before. It has you open a folder, right? In other words, it has you open a directory, and in that directory, it's going to show you the Ansible directory. We've got Ansible Apache. That's going to be the next lab where we actually build an Apache web server. And then we've got this directory, ansible-csr1kv. That's the directory that I'm currently in or was just in the terminal window. So here you can see we've got all of these different files, and we've got this backup Cisco, backup_Cisco_ router file. Now, this is our playbook, and the Ansible playbook is written in YAML. And so you may have looked at the host file and said, well, that kind of looked like YAML too. Correct, right? So we can, sorry, the host file is not YAML. The host file uses a different syntax. But we'll look at this and we say, oh yeah, so this is YAML, right? Because I see these 3 dashes at the top. While good practice, that is not mandatory. In this file, it would not be mandatory to have these 3 dashes, right? But good practice is we put the 3 dashes up here. So a play is just a matching set of tasks for a device or a group of devices. And a task is a single action. And you can see down here, we've got our tasks. Well, actually, let's start at the top. So we've got the name, right? And the name is just basically, I mean, we could make that whatever we wanted, but for our purposes here, the name is really defining just the name of this playbook, right? So we've got the name of the playbook. The host line, there's the alias that we used inside the host's file. And so that's how this playbook knows which host it's looking for in the host's file, right? Gather facts is set to false, and that's not a big deal. We're not going to be gathering any facts up. We've got the connection is local, and the lab mentioned this. It just means that it's running locally, right? And again, it's specifying that we're not using SSH, so therefore the connection is considered to be local. So the gather facts, and I'm drawing a blank here, it had something to do with the Python modules. It's just when we're using networking devices, it's not actually required. And so that's why the gather facts is false. I'm sitting here trying to remember those 2 settings there. All right, then we get down to the tasks, right? So the first task is here's the name of our first task, display the running config. Here's the name of our second task, save the output into this backups directory here. So the name of the task is display the running config, the iOS command, and that's a module that we can use that basically kind of helps Ansible run Cisco iOS commands. And so what are the commands that we're running? Well, the first command is show running config. Now, the register config is, and it's a variable that, oh my goodness. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the register is going to save, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's going to save the previous command, I think, as config. It stores it in the variable config. And then on our second task, we've got saved output. And what's the second task going to do? Well, we're going to do a copy. We're copying the content, right, of config.standardout. And so there's config. That's our variable that is representing the show running config. And we're saying send the output from the show running config command that's represented by that variable right there to the standard out, right? And then what are we going to do? Standard out, we set the destination to be this backups directory, and we do and create this file name in there with that name right there. And so this is going to create a backup for us. Now, you might look at this and say, well, wait a second, what if there's no timestamp or whatever? So I addressed that in the Python script. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and just leave it the way it is. All right, so let's go ahead and let's make sure that we have reachability to our device, to the CSR1kv. I'm going to ping 192.168.1.121. Okay, that works, so I can reach it. Let's go ahead and ping 192.168.1.1. And so this is the Cisco switch that we're also going to be working on. So how do we run our Ansible playbook? Well, we just say ansible-playbook, and then the name of that script. And if I hit tab twice, actually, it's going to give me the list of everything in the directory. So I'm going to say backup underscore Cisco router playbook.yaml, right? Because that playbook is a YAML file. So let's go ahead and let's go ahead and hit enter. And you can see here that it's going to go ahead and run through. And that is it, right? So that's it. It backed up our CSR1kv. How do we know that? Let's ls the backups directory. And there's that show run CSR1kv. In fact, if I said ls-l, let's get a longer listing and do a little time comparison here. So at 1902, and it's showing, okay, so that's showing, it looks like UTC time as opposed to the time here. But again, if I was to run that again, just trying to show you that, in fact, and this is where the idea of, hey, let's put a timestamp on that file is probably a pretty good idea. So it is writing that file there, right? So that is our file. So what we could also do is you may see the script run like this with a -i where you can specify the host's file, right? Now, again, we're already going to find this because we've listed it in the playbook. But if there, let's say the host file was somewhere else, right? Then I could use the -i for the hosts. Okay. Now I'm going to show you what happens when your syntax is off. And this is one of the most frustrating things, and this is the most common mistake that learners will make with this indentation, is trying to copy things out of a PDF and get it into the virtual machine, right? Whether it's VS Code or if you're using VI or Nano, whatever the case may be, I want you to watch what happens if I take this back 1. All I did was back the commands up 1. Now let's rerun this and see what happens. All right, it works. So what happens if I back that line up 1 more? So now it's even with the iOS command. So let's back it up again. And that is what you're going to see, right? So, and again, this is going to say conflicting action statements. And the reason that it sees them as conflicting is because they're on an equal level. And here's the problem. You can see here it says display the running config. The offending line appears to be here at the name, but that's not the offending line. So again, the first thing you should always check is your indentation. And the way to do that, and this is a great use case for using VS Code, because VS Code has these lines right here, and it shows you what things are lining up with which other things, like what text lines up with which text. So if you're getting a bunch of errors like that, highly recommend checking out your code in VS Code to make sure that things are aligned the way that they're supposed to be. All right, so if I was to go ahead and say cat backups, and I can't remember the name of the, show CSR. There we go. So here it is. So here is the running config for my CSR1kv, right? You can see it right there. I've even got a little serial number action going on, some spanning tree messages. Okay, so everything looks good here. So let's go ahead and hit enter a few times, get back to the CLI. Now we're going to create our playbook. We're going to create the playbook. We don't need to do the inventory file. So we're going to create the playbook. We're going to modify the playbook, or I should say, we're going to create a new playbook in which we're going to configure an IPv6 address on the Gigabit Ethernet 1 interface, right? And so that is the next. If we go into that, it's going to be the Cisco_router config. It's a really long file name. And so here we are. So here's my Ansible playbook YAML file, right? So there's the name. There's the host referencing the alias in the hosts file. Again, gather facts is false. We don't need that. That was an old Python type thing. Connection local, because we're not, excuse me, not SSHing. Tasks, what do we got going on here? The name of the first task is set the IPv6 address. And then we've got our iOS config helper module here, right? So the parent is going to be interface gigabit Ethernet 01. So think of this iOS config as getting you into global config, and then getting you into int gigabit Ethernet 1. And then what are the lines that we're going to put under gigabit Ethernet 1? A description, an IPv6 address, and an IPv6 link local address, right? And then what is task number 2? Well, that is show the IPv6 interface, right? So we're going to run an iOS command. And remember, these modules are different. iOS config, we go in to do some configuration work. iOS command, we're going to run some commands. Show IPv6 interface brief. And again, here's that register, right? Capturing the output in the variable name output. And then we're going to save, I'm going to scroll down a little bit there. The name of our third task, and actually what we could do here theoretically is come here and pop a blank line in there. And so the name of our third task is save the output. So where are we saving the output to? We're going to save it into /iOS_configuration. So there's going to be an iOS_configurations directory here, and we are going to copy our content. And what's the content? So output. Again, I don't have to call it output. I could say, you know, my output, whatever, but output is a good convention to use. And then you say output here. And then again, we're taking that output that we're getting and we're sending it to the standard out. But the standard out, what's the destination for it? Yeah, it's into this file right here called IPv6_output_ inventory hostname.txt. So let's go ahead and let's see, do we actually even have that configuration backups directory? Oh, I don't see it. Oops, sorry, ls-la. Yeah, we don't have that. So, but let's go ahead and run the playbook and let's see what happens, right? So how do we run it? We say ansible-playbook and then Cisco, and there it is. Now, I don't need to do the -i again because Ansible knows where it's going. And let's see if we get an error message here, or if it auto-magically is going to go ahead and create that directory for us and then dump the backup in there. And take a look at that. So that Ansible playbook right there just went onto the CSR1kv, configured the Gigabit Ethernet 1 interface on the CSR1kv. And so, you know, when we talk about automation tools, Ansible is an amazing tool. And it's a great way to not just do sort of like backup type activities. You can actually write the scripts to do configuration activities, because maybe you're not just working with one CSR1kv. What if you needed to stand up 5 or 10 of those? Wouldn't it be great to automate that? Have your hosts file reference all of the CSR1kVs, and then you run through your playbook and you do the following, right? For, you know, whatever it is you're going to configure. Maybe you're putting in, you know, like a basic OSPF config of some kind or something like that. So, all right, let's check that file out though. Let's go ahead and say more iOS_configurations and the IPv6 output.txt. And there it is. There is our show IP interface brief output. And you can see that was the address that we set as a link local. And there is our global unicast address. All right, so final thing. You might be asking, well, wait a second, you know, why would I use Ansible? Couldn't I use Python to do that? So let's take a look at how Python would handle that. And you can see there's a lot of code in here. I added in some step-by-step verbiage that's going to print out what exactly it's saying. But we can use this netmiko library, right? We're going to import the OS library and date time, because this is going to have our date timestamps in there. And so where this becomes really handy is we're able to go ahead and run this. We're going to get verbose output and, excuse me, and it's going to go ahead and create the backup directory. It actually checks to see if the backup directory is there. If it's not, it's going to create it. And then we SSH to the device, and that is all of the code, right? So that's everything that we need. So how would we run this? Well, let's go ahead and say Python 3 and the name of our Python script. And so we'll go ahead and hit run. We'll wait a second here. All right, and there it goes. And you can see we got the little ... as it was running. It says configuration backup save to ECC backup. So now let's go ahead and say, and actually, let me run it again, right? Because what I want to show you, this is why the timestamp becomes important, because it's going to guarantee that we have a unique name on that. And again, I should have thought of that when I was doing the Ansible one, but it didn't occur to me until we just started talking about it right here. So if I say ls-l on ECC backups, take a look at that. So now all I would need is a cron job to run maybe at the end of each day, maybe at the end of each week, to back up my entire infrastructure. And this is exactly how I could do that, right? And again, this is an example of just doing it with one host, right? But this is a dictionary. Right? This dictionary just has key value pairs. Could we do a list and in the list put each dictionary as its own device with its own values, and then do a for loop to iterate over each of the elements in the for list? And maybe I should do that because I've got a couple other Cisco devices here. I could do that as an example to show you how we would wrap all of this into a for list, and it would go out and it would grab the configurations off of multiple devices. All right, maybe for another time. But anyway, that is going to wrap up Lab 7.4.7, where we used Ansible to do some really cool stuff, right? Things that you could take away and implement in your environment right now is back up an iOS config on a Cisco CSR. And again, you saw that would work. You know, you do the show running config. Those are generic commands. We could grab the configs off of pretty much any Cisco device. And then we configured the CSR1kv with an IPv6 address. And then I showed you an equivalent Python script that would do the backup of the Cisco switch. But this was a Cisco switch on my local network, right? Instead of the CSR1kv. All right, well, that is going to do it again for 747. I hope you enjoyed this lab and got something out of it. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video.